This cat was one of the first people to interview me like 20 years ago, and he put it up on like Deep House page, which wasn't on my radar at the time. And the caption he used for everyone to be interested, he said he put up, "House music was created in New York, not Chicago." I ain't never tried to take away anything from Chicago. Right, 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 MUEMA?
Exactly.
Was it recording all that time?
The whole time. So I don't know what you said, but hopefully it was good. Today is Monday, June 2nd, 2025. Who are we speaking with?
Yo, DJ True, native New Yorker, Brazil
All day.
is my roots. That's who I am.
I love it. Perfect. Thank you for agreeing to do the interview. I love your name, DJ True. Tell us about its origin.
Oh, well, it goes back. I mean, it's definitely from a man Easy, a good friend of mine that I grew up with. He definitely was the person behind me coming out of my shell. I was pretty shy when I was young. Music always got me out of my shell. Just, well, it didn't get me out of my shell. It got me places. I would go where the music was, but I was still very shy. And my man Easy, he was one of those cats that made it clear that I shouldn't really be caring about what anybody thinks. You know what I'm saying? It's like we if you're fortunate enough, you have that person come into your life early that lets you know that, all this other exterior stuff that you're thinking about, it don't matter at all. It's about being yourself and not caring about, if it fits in, who it appeals to, just be yourself. He taught me how to be myself. All that to say with my name is he always had this saying, "We ain't new to this, we true to this." So that was kind of the roots of it, that he always used to say that all the time to me. But it's also because from a very young age, I was always telling like really unbelievable stories that happened because growing up in Manhattan, I grew up in the city. You run into a lot of things if you out there, and going back to like elementary school and grade school and telling stories that were like really outrageous, nobody ever believed me. So it was kind of like, a sarcastic, like people that got to know me after a while realized, oh, snap, everything he's been saying has actually been true. So I guess that's the other half to it. But it's about staying true to what you're about, not selling out. I saw the evolution of a lot of music. So a lot of people chose to go in a lot of different directions. And I wanted to stay true to like my roots, which is the loft, the garage, and disco fever and reggae lounge. There's a lot of New York roots that covers a lot of genres that I was fortunate enough to experience.
This is perfect segue into my next question. I have a question on each of those clubs. Tell us what was, and tell us your favorite memory of the Reggae Lounge.
Oh man, reggae lounge. Reggae lounge was amazing because it was I was that I have to go back a little bit to like collecting tapes, because we used to collect tapes of jams, and we had Fantastic Freaks versus the Cold Crush, and we always had, back in the days when jams, before rap music started being recorded and being put out, the only time you could actually hear is by collecting these tapes of these jams, which was, cats battling each other. So we were always on the hunt to get like these dope tapes. One of my favorite tapes I had was the Force MCs before they became the Force MDs. And they used to rap more, but they used to do these things like take like jingles and the theme from Gilligan's Island and replace it with all these rhymes. All of that to say, you got to keep me on track because I'll stray. But tapes, I started collecting tapes of Sound Clash, because what happened was when records started coming out, when hip hop started, putting out records, you go to like parties and let's say Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, whatever, they'll come out and do their song that they have out. Whereas if you were, out there before then, you were used to people just rocking over beats all night, even a little battle, it's, an unplanned battle, all type of stuff. But it was all about the DJ rocking beats and people getting on the mic. So when, the record industry picked up on hip hop and started putting hip hop records out, these cats started coming up and started doing their jam, and it changed the whole vibe of that whole hip hop scene to me. And that's what got me into Sound Clash, because Sound Clash had the same, feel. It had the same vibe, whereas, two sounds would clash, and you had the selector putting on just beats all night, and they're just going. It took me a minute to, understand what they were talking about, but once I, clocked in, I was there. And and most of the jams were happening in Brooklyn. And if you didn't know, Brooklyn was mad hot back in the days. It was all about stick up kids. They took pride in it. So you weren't trying to go deep into Brooklyn like that. Well, I wasn't too. I'll speak for myself. I was an uptown kid. We stayed uptown. We did the Bronx and uptown and downtown, but that's about it. So but Reggae Lounge opened up, and Reggae Lounge was a very special spot where they have Sound Clash in Manhattan, in downtown Manhattan. If For those of you that don't know, Reggae Lounge went on to be Canal Room, went on to be a few other Shine before Canal Room. So all these places, if you've been to Shine, if you've been to Canal Room, that was the original Reggae Lounge, just for reference. But my favorite night, I mean, unfortunately, all I could think of is like Sound Clash always ended up in gunshot. It was unfortunate, and that's why they had to end it, and that's why it evolved to the Island Club. The Island Club is what happened after too many people got shot. After, like, first Louis Lepke, I can remember Louis Lepke, Lepke, like the gangster. Um, he was a cat I remember that got shot right in front of Reggae Lounge. I think the last cat was Alternator. But yeah, there was just too much violence, so they just started playing just music and they turned it into the Island Club. And my favorite memory of that time was when it turned into the Island Club. I was really disappointed because I was really into a few sounds at the time, Mini Mart High Power. I just found out the other day that Mini Mart High Power is still around, which blows my mind. I gotta look them up, see what they're doing. But anyway, side note, Mini Mart. Anyway, there was so I thought it was gonna not be as good without the live sound clash, but what happened was this vibe, it became this like old school vibe of just rosters. And there was moments where the dance floor just became like a trance, where people were just skanking, like with their eyes closed and the whole room filled with smoke, to the point where you kind of almost bouncing off each other like a very, very, very light mosh pit, if you will. Nah, kid you not. We were like bumping off of each other, but we ain't care. Man, I remember that. I want to relive that so much. I don't know if that takes place anywhere. If anybody knows that's taking place somewhere, I've seen some like sounds in Africa where they were like really vibing out like that, but I haven't seen it here in New York in a long time. But that was very beautiful moments in the Island Club and in the Reggae Lounge. Just to circle back to your question, I should answer that question. Definitely, I guess Shinehead, Mini Mart, High Power, that whole scene. Yeah, I really loved watching Shinehead definitely perform at the live sound clashes. He was a standout at the time. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, that's perfect. Exactly what I'm looking for. Um, Speaking of reggae clubs, this is a little bit later than that, but did you ever go to Pulse in Midtown?
Pulse.
Uh-huh.
That sounds familiar. I'm really bad. Sometimes I'll be up in places. You'll name a club that I played, and I'll be like,
Yeah,
yeah, I
it's all
don't
good. It's
remember
all
it
good.
offhand.
It's all good. It was a cool record spot. Where were you born and where'd you grow up?
I was born here in Manhattan. Well, I was born in New York Hospital in Manhattan, but my family was living in the Bronx at the time, South Bronx, Morris Ave, not that far from Yankee Stadium. I lived there until I was about 6, I think. Yeah. And then I moved to the Upper East Side of Manhattan. First in a 5-story tenement on 92nd Street between First and Second. And then we got into Isaac's Projects, which is across the street. Yeah, it's across the street, First Avenue. It takes up from like, um, oh God, I shouldn't know this offhand. 92nd Street to 94th Street. Yeah, or 96th Street if you count the park.
Mm-hmm. No, context is super helpful. Another question. Tell us what was and your favorite memory from the disco fever.
Oh man, I have so many good memories from the Disco Fever.
Give us all of them. Let's go.
I think my favorite definitely is DJ Star Child. I got to chop it up with Star Child when I was working at Rock and Soul Records because he would come in like periodically. He would come in like every couple months. He stopped by, and it was funny. The first time I spoke to him, like I was talking to him about the fever, and he was like half ignoring me. And I guess he didn't really. I think a lot of people used to come up to him and claim they used to go to the fever and all that, but I guess he didn't believe them half of the time. So then I started dropping the names of the cats that I used to hang out with. And I was like, Nate T, Mr. Broadway. He was like, hold up, you were really there. And I always looked a little bit younger than I was. So at that time, he was like, how old are you? Which is always the question, you know. Now I'm starting to finally catch up. I don't don't look exactly like a kid anymore, but I don't think I look my age still. But and I was there a lot younger than I should have been. I got to put that out because being there as a child, I shouldn't have been up in there. So there's that too.
So tell us what was a disco fever? Where was a disco fever?
Disco Fever was 167th and Jerome Ave. I get scared when did I get the address right? But it was like the one of the birthplaces of hip hop. It was a spot that it was special to me because there was a lot of, spots that were contributing to hip hop at the time. But, Disco Fever originally had an older crowd. It kind of always did. Even when the younger kids came in, it was still, they had that older contingency there, which I always liked, because I don't ever even remember any serious problems going on in the Fever. It was always really safe. Curtis Blow was always there. I don't know if he was managing it at the time, but he was always there. And nah, it was just a super dope place because you got to see the MCs before. A lot of times you got to see them before they even came out. So when I would hear something on Mr. Magic or Red Alert, it's like, oh yeah, we saw him at the Fever last week. So we got to see cats before the record would drop, and it was a special spot. It was like I said, it was all about dancing and music, and like I remember dancing to the break of Super Sperm with which I was coming around to. DJ Starchild playing Super Sperm. And the Disco Fever playing the break for like 10 minutes straight, and people dancing to the point where the walls sweating. It was a spot. And for those of you that don't know, um, hold on. Who's the sound man for? See, I'm already having brain farts. I was afraid of this. I tried to take my ginkgo. Viola. See, I can't even say the name, so you know I didn't. Um, Tell me the sound designer for the Paradise Garage, sir.
Richard Long.
Richard Long. He did the sound system in Disco Fever too. I had a history with Richard Long before I even know who the man was, because when I was really young and we used to go to Coney Island, I was addicted to this bumper car ride that had the best music and best sound system on the planet. It was called El Dorado. Bump your ass off. It's written on the sign. And I found out years later that was also Richard Long. Yeah, Richard Long has a sound system, and the secret's out now. I think Nicky Ciano does parties there. He did one recently. I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah, he does his birthday party there every year. It's dope. I've never been, but I've heard it's dope, 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 dope. And the sound is incredible.
Yeah, I was addicted to that ride, and it was bugged out to find out later that it was him that did the sound system for that ride.
You know what also had a great sound system at Coney Island? I don't know if it was a Richard Long sound system. It might have been originally, but not anymore. The Himalaya. The,
Yeah,
the Himalaya,
that used to
that
bump.
sound system was
Yeah,
rocking, rocking,
yeah. We
rock.
used to just hang out in front of the Himalaya, just rocking with
Yeah,
chicks.
yeah, yeah.
After
Um,
going to the beach, that was like routine.
exactly. Tell us.
Memories.
Oh, this is great. Tell us your favorite memory from the Paradise Garage.
Oh Lord. Now, how do you pick that? I mean, every night in that place is special. Man. Um, wow. Hmm. Yeah, it's an overwhelming question. That's
Or
too
you
many.
could tell us how you discovered the garage, who brought you there, and your
Okay.
first impression. Like, what did you see, hear, smell? Who brought you there? Like, what time of night? Like, tell us, what was happening behind the speaker. Like, tell us the first time you went to the garage and that origin story.
All right. So the garage. Um, I was hanging out with a bunch of older cats. I kind of always hung out with older crew, and they were all about sound system in their cars. So they were the ones that started schooling me on who was doing sound design, and stuff like that, because that was their bag. And they started talking about Richard Long, and that's how I was introduced to the garage. Not Larry Levan, not the music. It was all about the sound system. So they're like, oh, you got to go, here. This is his masterpiece. They're like, you think the Disco Fever was good? Wait till you see and they were calling it the Gay Raj. So I was like, what's up with that? And they were like, yeah, it's a gay club, but you got to go anyway, man, because the sound is it's gonna blow your mind. It's something like you never felt or heard or seen before. So of course I'm like, man, you sold me on best sound, So yeah, we went down. I think I went with my sister the first time, because at that time I was so young that me and my sister had to um, yeah, we had to escort each other to certain things. Like if we were out too late, so we were kind of like, a lot of people just thought we were best friends, but we were kind of stuck with each other. That's the only way we get out and go somewhere. Is the other one would like chaperone. If yeah. So I think it was with my sister, and I think we just rolled up and asked someone to get us in with them, you know. And yeah, I had no idea what I was in for. I got on that line again. I told this story before. I was coming from uptown, from a hip hop scene. So I was trying to be cool. I was young. So I had no idea that, yeah, the idea of being cool and what I thought was cool partying was nothing compared to the level of what the garage was. Like, like I said, I was just describing Disco Fever with, them going for like 10 minutes to the break of Super Sperm. That's nothing compared to like Larry Levan playing to a blackout for 10 minutes. He would blacken the club out to the point where you can't see your hand in front of your face. Like that dark it would get in there. And like, yeah, just imagine that alone. You're in a club full of people. Like, I don't know what was the capacity of the garage? I don't even know. It was a lot. That's all I know. That many people and just in, pitch black darkness, because he loved doing that, just cutting off the lights. I love those moments in the garage. People like you'd be touching on people and dancing with someone and you don't even know who it is. And yeah. That's another thing about the garage. I come from, again, in the like scenes that I was coming from, you approach girls and you ask them to dance, or you try to get them to dance with you. I could not stand on the sideline of the garage more than 5 minutes without a girl grabbing me and like aggressively just pulling me out into the dance floor to dance with me. I didn't even know what to make of it. I was so young. I was just like, what is this? And yes, they were real girls. A lot of people ask that question. Not that trans women aren't real women.
No, thank you for sharing that story. Similar vein, tell us your favorite memory of the Loft.
Oh, the Loft is special too. I always talk about the Loft because apparently I missed the real Loft because I didn't make it to 99 Prince. And by the time I made it to the garage, it was like after the Loft, after the garage closed, I made it to the Loft. And what kept me going from I always tell this is really silly, but what kept me from going to the Loft for so long was there was a whole like in my neighborhood on the Upper East Side, it was very Latino. It's right before Spanish Harlem, and so we had this Latin contingency that they all claimed they went to the Loft, but meanwhile they played a lot of freestyle. So I automatically thought it was a freestyle club, and I really never liked freestyle. And it's funny because a lot of the cats that created freestyle and the biggest artists in the freestyle genre literally lived in my neighborhood, or I knew them somehow. Like KL from TKA lived across the street from me, and like knew me from when I was 7, maybe. So yeah, all those like cats grew up in the area. I don't know if that had something to do with no, that had nothing to do with it because I would loved it if cats in my neighborhood were doing great music. I just could not stand freestyle. There's not too many genres I can't stand. And sorry to be talking about something I hate, but yeah, it was just something about the freestyle, the Planet Rock beats, because they always felt like, those antiquated Planet Rock beats, and then add to it all woo, those off-key singers. Lord have mercy. You know what I'm talking about. I ain't calling out no names. I'm gonna leave it there. What were we talking about?
So the
I be
Loft.
straying.
Tell us your favorite memory from the Loft, and then which version of the location. So you missed 99 Prince.
Oh yes,
Um,
we're talking about
oh,
the
so,
Love
so
Scene.
which Loft did you go to then?
I went to Third Street. It was after, so yeah, I thought people were into like, I thought it was a freestyle club. A friend of mine finally set me straight. He was like, "Are you out of your mind? This is the Loft. This is the original." So I was like, "Okay, let's go." So I went down in there, and at the time I got there, the crowd was thinning out week by week because I was sold on the first week. I loved it. The way he was playing one record at a time. It reminded me of a lot of reggae dub DJs that, rock like that. I know if you're familiar with dub, there's cats that still rock on one turntable, and I love that with a passion, man. They just rock on one turntable, one jam after another. And, so yeah, it wasn't that strange to me. And, you know, this is the thing I talk about the Loft that's very different from my experience than a lot of other people's experience at the Loft. A lot of people don't like realize that as far as David Mancuso and Larry Levan, they were very forward thinking people. So their selection, their programming was also very progressive, and they would lose people. So I remember like people would love saying like Larry, take me back, Larry, take me back. And I never forget Larry used to always say, I don't go that way. He used to crack me up with that shit, but and these cats were not about playing that same records over and over again, you know. So I I gauged from David that he was tired of playing certain records, that he was playing all the way since the, 99 Prince. Because he has such a like large palette of music. And he started getting into the electronic stuff and all that. And a lot of the old school cats, a lot of the 99 Prince cats, I've said this before, they weren't feeling it that tough. He was losing a lot of them because they wanted to hear that same old shit. A lot of people get caught up in wanting to hear the same, records and stuff. And once, people progress and move on and, you know, people don't like it. They want to hear those to this day. There's a whole audience out here. They want to hear those same records. I don't know if Larry and David would even play them for them if they were still around. They were like, hell no. Anyway, that's a side note. But anyway, so the music that I was listening to at the Loft was not the traditional music of 99's Prince. I was blessed to hear like David play all this new stuff and electronic music that he was starting to dig on and his picks of the house, the early you know recording of house music. So yeah, it was a very special time, and I don't want to put him on blast, but he was on like, you know, ridiculous amount of drugs. So like that, hey, that played a part because he was playing a lot of out there stuff. Again, that's how he was losing people. But I was right there with him. I was like, okay, I was digging everything he played, man. I remember once he played, what you call it? My favorite things, the John Coltrane version. And oh my God, to hear that on that system and to see, and that's another thing because it weeded out everybody else except the diehards. So those diehards, they were bad as hell, man. The way they danced and everything, and then they had all that space to work with. I said something recently to Cosmo because she does this whole throwback radio show, Balearic, Balearic Breakfast, Balearic Breakfast. Anyway, and she takes quotes of what people thought, people's memories of the garage. I mean, of the Loft. Sorry, of the Loft. And one of my memories was people smacking the floor, like hitting it so hard, and people catching the quiet moments in the record to smack. And everybody would turn around and look at that person and applaud them. That was a special memory. Like, I don't know if it was sarcastic or they were just saluting them. Either way, it was just, yeah, it was hilarious. The whole smacking at the quiet moments. But that's also a testament to how hard, they were rocking, how much work they were putting in. Like, again, they had that open dance floor and it was light and people were dancing their asses off and they were committed to anything he played, and I love that kind of dance floor. We don't have enough of that. People are so judgmental of what's being played. I don't like this record. I like that record. I miss the times where like hardcore dancers came together and they were just committed to move to anything that came on, and yeah, it was a beautiful time. And we're talking like 87, 88. right before it turned into the choice, at the Loft. I was fortunate to really experience that special time and to get to know David, man. What a special guy.
Tell us about David Mancuso.
Um, Man, I never got to know him too well. The one thing I picked up on David is one thing I did learn is he pays attention. He's someone that's always paying attention to everything. So even though I thought he wasn't paying attention to me, he was. I should have known that just because of how little people were there, But at the same time, as a kid, you just don't. I think as a kid, I just didn't think people even paid attention to me, which was the case most of the time, because, yeah. Anyway, so later on, I found out that, well, oh, yeah, going back a little bit, you had his phone number to get into the Loft. It was like his home phone number. So you can't give me stuff like that because I was here calling him for all type of like information. But he didn't mind, I feel it out. I wouldn't be annoying the dude, he was open to it. So I had this like open line on the phone with him, and like I stopped calling him for a while, like a couple of years. And this is when he started the parties again. And he called me up, and that really tripped me out because he's never called me. I've only called him. And he asked me like, why haven't I been at the party? And I told him, well, first of all, it was really expensive at the time. It was a little above my budget. And, I was just on other things. So he was just saying he was missing my presence at the party, which to me was like, really? I was really shocked by that. But it speaks to like how much, attention and like concern he had for people that I didn't even realize until he took me out to lunch. He was like, come on, I'm taking you to lunch. And like, and I got to pick his brain. And yeah, he's a deep dude. He's someone that, like I said, because again, when we were back in the Loft, he looked really spacey. He looked like this, bugged out Jesus character, just back there high playing records. I didn't think he even noticed I was in the room, and yet he paid attention to everybody that was there. He knew them by name, you know. So yeah, he's a really personable guy, even though he doesn't come across that way. That's what I would say.
Thank you for that. Want to pivot to
I need some water. Go ahead.
absolutely. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna. I'll get some water later. Um,
Much better.
well, let's go to your early influences in the beginning. How did your mother's Brazilian heritage and frequent trips to Rio de Janeiro shape your musical identity?
Oh man, big time. I always draw parallels between Brazil, well, Rio, and New York City because it's definitely about those cities. It ain't all over Brazil, you know. So, um, just because of the nightlife and just like in New York City, we had these things where we were plugging into lampposts and setting up sound systems and parking lots of the projects or playgrounds and just literally rocking the street all night. And Brazil was doing the same thing, man. In the favelas, they were just plugging in to the, light posts. So there was so many parallels. And I was talking to my sister about this recently because I had my sister. My sister lives in Atlanta, and she stopped by recently. And I'm blessed with really good memory, so I'm always bringing up really old memories to people. And I was bringing up to her, like, we went to a summer school, Mangueira, and summer schools are not literally a school. I don't know. I'll explain it for people that don't know what it is. It's like kind of a community center, and it's kind of like it's per neighborhood, usually per favela. It's usually favela backed, and um, it's just like a cultural center where they create samba groups that then compete in carnival. But Mangueira's one of them, and we went there and like we were breakdancing and like boogieing like before they ever even saw it, and they were tripping out. And she didn't remember that until I brought it up. But yeah, it's times like that were really surreal. But like I said, Brazil had their own street thing that was like very parallel, in ways, especially nightlife, the outdoor nightlife and doing it in the streets and the music in the ghettos and, you know, yeah. But I'm sorry, I keep losing your question. What was your question?
No, it's all good. It's also a great story, by the way. I've also been to Mangueira as well. So it's a
Ah,
dope school. So I've been there and to the favelas as well. Um, the question was, how did your mother's Brazilian heritage and frequent trips to Rio
ah.
shape your musical identity?
Well, first of all, the record collection in my house. I don't think, definitely that's the start of it all. And my mother used to always be the host of big parties. The whole Brazilian community used to come together at my house for her parties. She was the cook, and I was the DJ. I was serious from as long as I could remember. And I was just attracted to these records. And I had also another friend, my mother's friend. My mother had a friend that lived in the neighborhood. His name was Josiah. He was a Brazilian cat brother, and he had an insane amount of records. And I used to go to his house and go through his records, and I just wanted that. I just wanted these plates of plastic that contain this beauty that just moved my soul. And yeah, so when people ask me how long have I been a DJ, I always say all my life. Cause like again, I can't even people think I'm exaggerating. My sister knows. Like at like 4 or 5 years old, I was trying to put on records, in the middle of the party. And I took over that job pretty early. And yeah, it also I guess the dancing, when it came to dancing, I guess I had a little bit of advantage because I was dancing samba all my life. And anybody that doesn't know samba is all about footwork. So yeah, I guess those two ways was a big deal because I have fortunately had a lot of rhythm, and I fortunately had a lot of Brazilian records that some of them I still have today.
What are some of your earliest memories experiencing Carnival and Samba in Brazil?
Oh man. My earliest memories was the Bloco do Piranhas, the piranhas. There's this block where all the guys dress as women. And when I say all the guys, I mean every dude does it. It was really interesting at like a really young age of like 5 years old, to see a bunch of masculine men like my cousins are really masculine, almost to the point they're kind of homophobic. And they all did it, and they did it as a thing of like, no, we all make an exception for this like foolishness that we do. And I was like, okay, I think that had a really big impact on me on like, I guess, being less homophobic than a lot of my friends, because when you see a whole town of men cross dress, that kind of changed your perspective on things, you know?
Of that. I'm gonna get a drink real quick. Let me just get a glass of water. Give me 30 seconds.
Sure. I need one too again.
Perfect.
Do you edit this? I hope so. Why am I bringing up Bloco de Piranhas? This guy sets me up. He gonna leave all of that in. It's better than the first time. This cat was one of the first people to interview me like 20 years ago. And he put it up on like Deep House page, which wasn't on my radar at the time. And the caption he used for everyone to be interested, he said, he put up, house music was created in New York, not Chicago. So this was up for like 2 years, unbeknownst to me. And like cats are coming at me with this kind of heat that I ain't, not the old school cats, by the way. The old school cats knew about it and they were like, that's true. Not like that's true, but that's true. And they know where I'm coming from, you know. I ain't never tried to take away anything from Chicago. Right, right? Right, MUEMA?
Exactly.
Was it recording all that time?
The whole time. So I don't know what you said, but hopefully it was good. um,
That'd be like a little surprise.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. We love surprises. Um, let's talk about your musical journey and collecting. My
Okay.
next question, when did your addiction to collecting music begin? And do you remember the first record that truly moved you?
Ooh, first record that truly moved me. There was definitely records in my mom collection. Definitely, there's quite a few. Should I name one? All right. First one I bought, like on my own, right? Is that what you're asking?
Give us both. Give us those stuff in your records, mom's collection that moved you, and then also what you bought too.
Um. Okay, from my mother's collection, she had this really rare record that I still have to this day that I've mixed into a lot of house tracks, unbeknownst to others, but in Alma, it was my secret weapon of just these beats, and it was a recording of um, Mocidade Independente de Padre Miguel, which is one of the summer schools out of Rio. And it was they're considered the hottest percussion, they still go by that. Mais quente. And that's definitely my favorite record from her collection by far. I think about 6 years old, yeah, first grade. When I first started when I started first grade is when I first got allowance. My allowance was $5. So at the time, I think records were still $2.99. They went up to $3.99 very quickly, and I was really distraught because all I had was $5 to work with. And so now with tax, it was like 433, if I was correct. And it only left me with like 77 cents for candy and other stuff. But yeah, that early. So I guess one of the earliest is one of my most early, one of my earliest purchases that I could remember was I was in a five and dime. It wasn't a Woolworths, but it was kind of like a Woolworths five and dime type of situation. I don't know if you remember, but I'm dating myself, but it ain't no secret about the clubs I've been naming. But there was a time where you had records everywhere. You go to like five and dime, this, that, or the other. There'll be a section with records, and they have Funkadelic, One Nation Under the Groove. So I picked this record up, man. If you don't know about the art on One Nation Under the Groove, try to get your hands on an album cover of One Nation Under the Groove because it's just this comic book of black art that's somewhat X-rated and it's just dope. That's the only way. It's like it was my first introduction to like Afrofuturism because you had that going on too. And so by far, One Nation Under the Groove, man. I remember, and this is how my weird memory works. I can still kind of see the person behind the counter when I bought this record. Because I remember my young ass went up to the counter and it was a brother. And I asked him, I said, "Is this record any good?" And he looked at me with the biggest grin on his face and he said, "Oh yeah." He said, "Oh yeah." So anyway, One Nation Under the Groove. I don't know what year that was, but it was early. It wasn't that long after it was put out, so do the math. What was that? 78? I don't know.
Something like that. Uh, how did your experiences at Rock and Soul and Barry's help you become a tastemaker in the underground scene?
Oh man. Let's start with Barry's because a lot of people don't know Barry's. Barry's is on 23rd between Park and Lex. And it was just this hole in the wall that actually had some pretty decent record. And it was mostly because of this cat named Patrick. I got to give Patrick some props. There was this older brother, gay man, that was in there. And I honestly don't even know how long he'd been working there, but I'm guessing he was there for a long time. And he taught me so much about music. Oh my God. In the most arrogant way, he always talked to me like I don't know shit about music, but I was happy to listen to him because I was just a music nerd, just trying to soak up everything and anything that I can get from, yeah, music knowledge. So, um, now working at Rock and Soul was a whole nother experience. Rock and Soul, I think I met everybody. Every DJ on the planet came through Rock and Soul, man. It was overwhelming at times. Like, you don't even know what to say to cats, when you see them. But they're coming through. Like I said a little earlier, I met Star Child for the first time there. I didn't meet Star Child all the years that I was going to Disco Fever, and there he was coming into the store like every few months and stuff. And so it was cool. It was cool to really get in touch with the hip hop because I had strayed a lot to house at the time and working at a spot like Rock and Soul rather than, a house oriented record store. It had every genre in there. So I was able to connect with the reggae heads, with the house heads, with the, hip hop heads. And when you're the person in the record store, you could automatically show everybody your knowledge. So I'm glad to say that a lot of people were impressed by my knowledge. They had a whole section of bootlegs when I first got to Rock and Soul. And I kid you not, half of those bootlegs had the wrong titles. And I went through all of them, just correcting them. They had hilarious things like Seven Deadly Sins was the band, and Lust was the title, just stuff like that. So I just, yeah. And this one's for Shirley. Shirley is one of the owners of the place. When I also got there, I found out that there was this catalog of all this like cutout music, all this like, throwaway music. And she wasn't, and it was so cheap. And I was like, oh my God, why aren't we buying this? And she's, sorry to say it, she's so cheap. She didn't want to risk buying any music that you couldn't return if you couldn't sell. So, in other words, this was like final sale stuff. So I told her, are you kidding me? Like the titles that were in there, I was like, listen, I made a deal with her. Like, if we sell these, I get this. If we don't sell these, I'll buy them myself. So we filled it in with all those reissues and everything. That's because of me. And they're still there, a whole bunch of reissues and everything. But yeah, I couldn't believe. And another story about rock and soul. Oh my God, I need to start with this. I didn't know at the time the people that worked at Rock and Soul before me. So one day I was down in the basement and I come across this collection and I start going through it. And every record in this collection is just mind blowing fire. And I'm like, whoa. So I go back upstairs and I'm like, Shirley, what the hell? And she's like, that's Walter's records. You don't touch those records. If you know anything about this angry Jewish woman that runs Rock and Soul, she's a trip. She loves yelling at people. So she yelled at me for going through those records. I'm like, Walter Gibbons records are in the basement of Rock and Soul? So over time, I got her to sell me a lot of those records for super dirt cheap. And that's just one of those miracles. I got a bunch of Walter Gibbons records in my collection. It's crazy. Got his handwriting on one of them with his name.
What an incredible story. Can you describe a moment where you discovered a track that changed your direction of your DJ sets or your reputation as a DJ?
A record that changed. Damn. That's a hard one. Ask me that again.
Yeah, describe a moment where you discovered a track that changed the whole direction of your DJ sets or your reputation as a DJ.
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I gotta think of a name.
We can
Hmm.
skip it and come back to that if you want to just
All
marinate.
right.
All right, let's do that. Let's talk about radio and broadcasting. You had a college radio show. Tell people about that. Where was that? When was that? How was that?
Yes, WACR 90.3 FM. I started the Deeper Than Disco radio show. Thought of that name because at the time I was really into classics, playing rare classics, saw my whole loft bit. And people would always ask me, like, what kind of music do you play? And I was like, oh, like 70s classics. And people would always say, oh, disco? And I'm like, nah, kind of deeper than disco. And that's kind of where the name came from. And at the time, there was like no house music being played on WACR. They had a whole house music, like 24-hour marathon the other day. I was like, that's what's up. So I kind of feel like I'm a part of that. I fought so hard to get a DJ booth in there. At the time, I would bring my whole DJ like equipment up into like for the radio show every week. I would bring turntables, my Yuri, everything. And I have a very clear memory of when Todd Terry was my guest once, and we had like a blizzard, and me and Todd were walking towards the city college building, and nothing had been shoveled. We're like knee to waist deep in snow, carrying crates of records and equipment. And I look over to him and I'm like, man, you gotta really love it to do all this shit, man. And I just appreciate that's one of those cats, man. You know, my and going back to I gotta give props to Matthias Helbron. That's a DJ producer, very talented cat who I had at the radio show, and Todd just came with him when he was my guest, and we just hit it off from there. And Todd's one of those cats that I still consider one of my brothers, man. He's just always like really came to bat for me, and yeah, he's still the king. Still tied to God, still doing it around the world. I think he's in Ibiza right now, but he's a dope cat. And it was definitely a privilege to get to know him on that level. I still have a tape of him playing like hip hop classics. Well, not hip hop classics, but the block, like jam, I guess, playlist, Before I Let Go, and you know what I'm talking about. Love Thing and all that. I have him cutting it up and doing that kind of mix because he wanted to do that just for my radio show. One day I'm gonna release it, put it up, man. It's fun stuff.
How did it feel when Sirius Satellite Radio picked up your show for a primetime slot?
Oh man, that was a dream, it was funny because I had a short stint at CD 101, which was like a smooth jazz radio station, right before they closed up shop. Well, they didn't close up shop. They were bought by another entity. They were owned by Tribune at the time, and they were bought by Emmis. Emmis owned Hot 97 and Kiss at the time. And when CD 101 bought when Emmis bought CD 101, I knew that CD 101 wasn't gonna last, and it didn't. And people were like, "Oh, you should really get into, Kiss FM because, your style and everything, you're actually more fitted for it." And I told them that Kiss FM isn't going to last too much longer after that. And everybody gave me the nastiest look. If any of those people watching, I doubt it, but yeah, I hated that to be true, but we saw what happened.
Wow, you had foresight.
It
Uh,
was just the whole radio industry. I mean, that was my dream to work in radio, but the way it was going and the route it was where it was already when I broke in, it was horrible. Like I just wanted to put good music on the radio. I wanted to be like a Frankie Crocker type, break new music and just do that, but it was already passed off to the program, the programmer, so I was interested in that. I was like, okay, I can do that. But once I got to that, I couldn't even do that. Like the person that was training me to do that, he relied 100% on focus groups to pick what was going to go on the air or not. And I was like, oh no. So you don't even have say in the choice. They're like, and he's like, yeah, you do have say. You pick the ones for the focus group to listen to for them to make no, I can't do that. You know what I mean? But that's where the radio business was at by the time I got into it, unfortunately. I mean, at Sirius was another one of those amazing blessings. I was on the way down to WMC and I ran into these two cats and I did something for them, not even thinking about it. And then when we got off in Miami, we got off at Fort Lauderdale. That's what it was. He was like, they asked me, well, how are you getting to Miami? And I'm like, and at the time I was getting on some bus or something, you know, and they were like, oh, hell no, we'll give you a ride. So they pulled up with these like giant SUVs. And I'm like, oh, shit, these cats are balling. Geronimo. One of his cats' name is Geronimo, and they started telling me about this satellite radio that's going to be big and everything. And I was like, oh, okay. So, I didn't see him for the rest of WMC, but I gave him my info. I get back to New York like months later, and he hits me up and he's like, yo, do you remember me? I'm like, oh, hell yeah. You know, you looked out for me. He got me all the way to Miami, and he was like, yo, we're looking for, dope house DJs. I was like, yo, say less, and he said they did the research and everything. He checked out my radio show. He actually listened to a couple, unbeknownst to me, he listened to a couple of my radio shows. And he's like, yeah, you're what we're looking for because you're not playing like he said I wasn't playing, the stereo. He didn't say stereotypical. He just said the typical house music. because at the time, like a lot of the house DJs, and it's partly because we didn't have too much to pick from, kind of played more or less all the same records, you know. So I was still injecting things that, you know, people hadn't heard. And my whole repertoire was always trying to bring records that, you know, other people weren't playing. So I guess that's what appealed to him too.
Nice.
The sad story to that is I walked in one day, you know, it was a beautiful job. I had the after work drive. I would just come in once a week, drop off my mix and pick up a check. And they called me up to the like office one day when I came to drop off my mix and pick up a check. You already know that's not good. They calling me upstairs. So I went upstairs and they were like, "Yeah, we can't justify continuing to pay you because we have like over, I don't know what they said at the time, 300 submissions a week that aren't even asking to get paid." They were like, "But you can still have your spot, which is a very coveted spot. So we don't suggest you, you know, give up your spot, but but we're not going to pay you anymore."
What did you
I
do?
was like, "Well, damn. Sounds like I'm fired." Yeah, so that's what happened at Sirius.
Wow.
And then I checked in with like all these big name DJs that were doing shows on Sirius, and all of them weren't getting paid either. But they all had like ulterior motives because they were all playing their own music. You know, it was like a showcase for their label or whatever the fuck it was. And I was like, "Oh damn." So I don't know if anybody gets paid at Sirius, but at that time they were running with the whole everybody wants to get on the radio, so why are we paying anyone? So that was the end of that gig. But it was nice while it lasted.
Wow. Tell us a story about how you convinced Kevin Hedge to make his first DJ appearance on your show.
Yeah. Because I mean, musicians, I always want to know what musicians are listening to. You know, if you're making, especially if you're playing, if you make music that appeals to me, I want to know what you're listening to. I want to know what moves you. You know, if you had the opportunity to pick records. And the other thing is, it's on the radio. This is how I sold it to them. It's on the radio. You don't have to mix. You know, you don't have to DJ. You're programming. All you're doing is picking a selection of records that, you know, move you. So, you know, he finally agreed to it. You know, it's funny at the time. Um, I double booked his day, and it's partly because of this this girl named Asia Shine, which you probably know. She convinced me to have, oh Lord, what's his name? Oh, remember his name? Excuse to show off my t-shirt. Act like I'm stretching. um, I can't think of it. Gart Trinidad. It's a really big DJ right now. He's always doing his thing. And he was in town and she convinced me to have him on the show, even though I had Kevin there. And she showed up with a whole camera crew. And Kevin Hedge almost freaked out. He was like, "Yo, I didn't agree to this." It was like wild. So it was really weird that night. But nah, he played incredible records, man. I knew, you know, he'd be an incredible DJ. He is one now. But at the time, you know, I would even say our DJ for the night, you know, Kevin Hedge, and he'd be like, "I'm not a DJ. I'm not a DJ." He was like really bothered by the fact that I kept calling him a DJ. And I'm like, "Dude, man, you're the DJ for the night." But, you know, you knew he was gonna have like it was just gonna be innate for him. I mean, of course. And he's an amazing DJ now. And he liked a lot that I had a version of the whole um I just said his name earlier. Frankie Crocker at the end of his show. Like, you know how he does the Frankie Crocker thing? I had a version of that. I didn't do the exact same thing as Frankie Crocker. I had my own version of it. And he asked me, he was like, "Are you doing that because of Frankie Crocker?" And I was like, "Of course." And I like to believe I influenced him bringing back the Frankie Crocker at the end of the show too. He'd have to confirm that.
Great story. Let's talk about some of your events. Oh, before we do that, let's talk about DJing. How did you balance DJing with some of the health challenges that you faced in the past?
um, Man, there isn't one. I mean, I guess what the health challenge you're saying is I have Crohn's disease,
Yes, yes.
and I guess it's challenging. I mean,
Like, did
it
that
is.
impact your DJ career? And if so, like, what was the impact?
Man, early on, I got booked in Japan, man, and it was like it was heartbreaking that I got sick like the week before. I was in the emergency. I was in like the hospital the day before, and I was in full denial. I was still trying to get on a flight like the next day to get to Japan. That's how bad I wanted to go to Japan. And it was a realization of like I can't really go like to too far places, too remote places in general. Like even if I was in good health, it's probably not a good idea. Like Japan is really strict on weed. Weed is my medication. There's a lot of obstacles in other nations that, weed is still illegal. And yeah, just the amount of time it takes to get there. If I have too long of a flight, it's challenging. But as far as DJing, I mean, at the end of the day, I've always fasted through my DJ sets, not by choice, but because there's no really food, and most club situation, most party situations, there's not much food. So I mean, I've always fasted through DJing sets, so it doesn't bother me that much in that sense. But it can get challenging. Like, it restricts me from going long distance, which sucks, or going to places that I don't know if I'm going to be able to get my medication.
Got you. Let's pivot. Talk to us about the Alma Collective. What motivated you and Miller Cruz to start the Alma Collective? And how did you envision its role in New York City nightlife?
Well, I guess it all started in the living room of Carmen Valentine. Um, Carmen, in her own right, she's just this music social butterfly. She's the sister of Juan Valentine, which is a very talented DJ and producer in his own right. And she was dating Miller at the time, and I was dating Joanne, and we were kind of on a double date at her house. And Miller was playing all this music, and I was like, I just loved everything he was playing. As I'm sure there's not tons, but there's many, different genres within the Brazilian umbrella of music. And I don't like all Brazilian music. There's a lot of stuff that's corny, I'm very, I don't like corny. I just don't. And I can be really harsh on what I consider corny and what I don't. And he was playing nothing but good stuff that appealed to me. And, I got to give credit a lot to the girls. They saw how much we were vibing. And I'm pretty sure it was one of them that was saying, you guys should rock together. It was either Carmen or Joanne. And I was open to the idea, and not to take anything away from Miller. He wasn't really a DJ at the time, but he was a percussionist and a really percussive ear. And he would play things of like different tempos and somehow make it work. And it would trip me out. And it was like an instinctual thing. If you know anything about me, I love like what I call zoning. Like there's a level that I feel like athletes get to, artists get to, that is the zone where they're tapped in so much that they're not even really thinking about what they're doing. It's almost on instinct. It's almost, if that makes any sense. And I'm really into people tapping into that, and I feel like he did in many ways. He like naturally just listening to music, he taps into his own and picks another song that makes sense. Even though it's a different tempo or whatever, it just makes sense. There's people that are just good programmers. And then just playing with me, he just got better at mixing. And then it was unstoppable when we were both rocking on the same, mindset. Hello.
Yeah, I'm here. Um, how would you describe your DJ style?
Oh boy. I've always said everything soulful. That's my MO. That's my brand. Like when I first started, like there was cats that played a little bit of everything, but people that used to say they played everything back in the days, I kind of felt like they played like the pop records of each genre. You know what I mean? So there was always pop records in each genre, and I was beyond that. I was picking, things just by my own taste. So I realized the correlation between all these, like if it was drum and bass, it was like soulful drum and bass, hip hop, soulful hip hop, house music, soulful. So I was like, yeah, so it's everything soulful, and it's, I guess at first that was my whole thing. Like I only started incorporating more of the Latin, I guess a little bit later, you know. But yeah, I kind of feel like there's a certain like there's music that makes you feel a certain way. And I feel like if it makes me feel this way, obviously I'm not the only one. And a lot of the times the music that makes you feel like that is a bit obscure, So it's like I just want to share it with other people and make them feel the way I feel when I listen to it. At the end of the day, you know. That's pretty much it. And same thing with dancing. If something makes me dance on a certain level, I obviously got to hit other people that way too, you know. Even though I was wrong about the what you call it, the broken beat when that first came out. I don't know if you've ever experienced me trying. You were around a lot, so I don't know if you experienced me trying to play broken beat when it first dropped on like soulful house heads. But nah, they weren't too into it.
Um,
I never got why. I
right.
always thought it would translate, but it didn't quite hit. Neither did drum and bass. That tough.
No, no, that would work in the UK, not here. It just never caught on here. Like
Yeah,
that's
I
probably.
thought the broken beat definitely would, man.
Mhm.
I was digging
Let's talk about New York City. What happened to New York?
it. What kind of question is that?
We
What
had
happened
disco
to it?
fever. We had disco fever. We had the Loft. We had the Paradise Garage. Right. Um, what happened?
I was listening to this appeal recently for longer DJ sets. And I'm like, the problem isn't the DJ sets, the problem is the audience. I mean, the DJ sets are only catering to the audience. You can't play longer DJ sets for people that you can't even hold their attention more than 10 minutes without them looking at their phone. And that's being generous, 10 minutes. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, there's a lot that's happened. Like I said to somebody recently that, you know, there's the phones, there's people don't dance the way they used to, there's the extreme narcissism. There's a lot of like components on the new dance floor that makes it far different than what we experience, you know. I mean, I was talking about this recently because I guess because of everything that's going on in the world, there's so much emphasis on community and stuff. And, there's a lot of community around a lot of music scenes right now, which is great, except like I feel like when I was going to clubs, like when back in the days, like most of the people that were at clubs, they were there because they were kind of social misfits. They weren't like that much about community. They were just like these, like, you know what I mean? Like they didn't fit into any real group, and that's why they were there. And like I feel like the club scene has become a group in of itself. So where do the people go that don't fit into even that group, since that's become a group? Am I making sense? I was always attracted to the outliers, the weirdos and whatnot. I just always found them more interesting. Like when I went to the garage, like I went all around the club, checked out all the best dances and everything. And I always find a spot at a party. If you see me at a party that I'm a regular at, you'll probably find me more or less in the same area, the same spot, dancing. And I picked the spot because of this one particular dancer at the garage. Her name was Allison. I know some people might know Allison. That's why I'm saying her name. Or was it Alice? No, Allison. Yes, Allison. She was this tall, lanky white woman that was a lawyer by day, and she had the weirdest, like, I wouldn't say weirdest moves. She just had her own style. And she would just lose herself in the music and just go off and just be doing her thing. And I just wanted to dance around her just because her freedom. And even at the time, even at the Paradise Garage, people would laugh at her. People would laugh at her because she was quirky. She was weird and quirky. And I don't know why. I'm attracted to those kind of people. I got their back, man. I like weird, strange, offbeat characters. They're my peoples usually the time. Most people have described me like that. So, birds of a feather, I guess. Did I answer the question?
You perfectly did.
Okay.
What advice do you have for the next generation?
Next generation. Oh my God. Lose yourself in the music. 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 I know it's hard to block everything out that's going on when you have so many distractions, and you're obviously very concerned with how you look a lot of the time, but try to forget about all that. Try to forget, you know, get yourself in a situation that they don't have phones. Like I go to parties that they're not cool with phones on the dance floor. So at least you could eliminate, someone trying to record you at your most vulnerable moment or something like that. Because I understand that's another one. I didn't even mention that. People have fears of being, outside of themselves because they don't know how it's going to be picked up and documented. you know we didn't have the fear of seeing how we looked the next day by someone we didn't even know was recording us. Facts. You know what I'm saying? But oh yeah, my advice, no, lose yourself in the music. That's what it's about. Like for me, like I can't even describe how much of a release music is for me. It's a very personal relationship. That's where I was going with the whole community thing too. I love the community. I love everybody that loves music as much as me, and vibe out as much as I do to music, but it is very personal. Like I have this communion with music that I try my hardest to lose myself completely in it, to the point where it's dictating every step before I can even think of it myself. If you know. Seriously though. Like again, back to this whole zoning thing. Like I really feel like, there's a point that you can reach where you like I do things on the dance floor that I didn't even think I could possible for me to do, and I come back home and I try to do it again and I can't. It was something that I did when I was totally in the moment and I wasn't even thinking about it at the time. It just happened, and you kind of want to get to that level. It's special. It's beautiful, man. It's what dancing's all about. It's what music is all about, in my opinion. That's it.
Similar vein question. Looking back at your DJ career, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently?
Oh man, there's not much I would do differently. I don't have I have very few regrets. Like there's a lot of people, there's a lot of bridges I burnt because obviously this is the music business and there's a lot of dirt being done on the music business. And it's funny because I didn't think I'd burn as many bridges as I have because I'm someone that I don't gossip about people. I don't talk to others like about others that I don't like. I usually go straight to the person, have a conversation with them. And I never could have anticipated how left that can go. Because, I try to come from a loving, position. But when you're, attacking, I guess it feels like an attack when someone's questioning, what you're doing and how you do it. So of course they're going to be defensive, but the level of defensiveness was nothing like I expected. People will slander you, people will say all type of craziness about you that you don't even know what's going on half of the time. But as everything comes to light, you find out in time. And I was very surprised. All right. And I guess I would have probably skipped some of those conversations because unbeknownst to them, I was really coming from a place of love to them because if I don't care anything about you, I'm not gonna say shit about you. To you, I should say. In other words, if you're doing dirt and you're somebody I don't care for, I don't care. I'm only going to talk to you if you're somebody I respect, if you're somebody, I have some kind of relationship. I feel like we're friends on a level that I could talk to you about it, you know? And that's the only reason I would have that conversation, you know? But, you're touching on touchy things. So, people have the reactions that they have. It's unfortunate that people, don't fuck with me because of that. They know it's because of that. They'll try to act like it's about something else, but they know the conversations we've had, you know, and I don't wish any bad will on any of them, man. I still got love for most of the cats that hate me, and partly because of the music and, you know, yeah, it's like I have a love for this music that even if you're like a trash human being, the way you carry yourself in your own personal life, I can't really separate that from I can separate that from the music. A lot of people can't, you know. And for those people that can't and wondering how I can, it's a good thing you don't know what I know. Because you wouldn't be listening. No, they stop. Nah, there's a lot of bad characters out here, and I thought, like, I can speak to a lot of them. And, a lot of people don't know, but in my 20s, I was a devout Christian, deep in the church, carried a Bible in my record bag. I used to preach to everybody to an annoying extent. People that know me back then know what's up. But they had love for me for it. And that's where I come from. I'm all about, I like to believe I can have an impact on somebody's life if I come to them, through love and point out you know, their whackness in a loving way and ask them what's up with that shit. But you know, whack people are gonna be whack people, man. You can't change them. That's one thing I learned. If there's anything I would have changed, I would not spend any time trying to change whack people. I spent way too much time trying to change people that are just trash people. Unfortunately, they're out here, and I don't think there's much change in them. Look who's president. Uh, just saying.
Thank you so much. I'm glad we're able to connect. Fantastic interview. I guess before we sign off, if someone wants to book DJ True, what's the best way? Should they just hit you up on Instagram, IG?
IG, I'm on IG often, so that's
Perfect.
the most busy. Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
most on that. Facebook, forget it. I'm not on Facebook that tough anymore. Yeah. Yeah, IG, definitely. And that's DJ True 212.
Thank you so much, True. Great to connect after all these years.
Awesome, man. Thank you for having me. It's an
Thank you,
honor.
guys. Have a good night. All right, bye-bye.